Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, it's Diego with the beautiful Karina, my lovely prometida. And we're waiting for our K1 visa to get adjudicated at the Service Center in California, USA. Our NOA1 letter is dated April 18th, 2022. So we are in month 13 technically. Now Karina is from Caracas, Venezuela, but she is a legal resident of Bogota, Colombia since 2018. And I live in the Panhandle of Florida near Pensacola, north of Navarre Beach. And Navarre Beach is where we're going to get married as soon as we get through this waiting process. I know it's difficult, guys, but it's part of the deal. But this video is about Cuba, the beautiful people of Cuba, and the embassy in Cuba, and a little bit of the history of this beautiful little island chain. Come on along. Now, Cuba is, it's officially called the Republic of Cuba, and it is an island country comprising the island of Cuba, as well as Isla de la Juventud and several minor archipelagos. Now, actually Cuba has nearly 4,200 islands, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. And it has cays and islets located in the northern Caribbean Sea at the confluence of the Gulf of Mexico and the Atlantic Ocean. So Cuba is also subject to hurricanes, unfortunately. And the location, to be more specific, is east of the Yucatan Peninsula, which is Mexico, south of both the American state of Florida, Florida where I live, so Cuba's south of where I live, and the Bahamas, and it is west of Hispaniola, which is basically Haiti and the Dominican Republic. And it's north of both Jamaica and the Cayman Islands. So Cuba is south of us, but it's a long way from here, where I live in the Panhandle. Havana is the largest city and is the capital of Cuba, and other major cities include Santiago de Cuba and Camagüey. I hope I pronounced that correctly. The official area of Cuba is 42,426 square miles, and that doesn't include their territorial waters. And I don't know what that is in kilometers. I don't work in kilometers. I live in the USA. And we work in miles. And it does have an exclusive economic zone too, outside of the territory of Cuba. Cuba is the second most populous country in the Caribbean after Haiti, with over 11 million inhabitants. So 11 million people are all squeezed into Cuba. Woo! Culturally, Cuba is part of Latin America, and it is a multi-ethnic country whose people, culture, and customs derive from diverse origins, including the Taíno-Ciboney peoples and the long period of Spanish colonialism. Here we go with the Spanish. They love it. They seem to try. Back in the day, they were trying to control everything. Now, after first landing on an island then called Guanahani, Bahamas, on the 12th of October, 1492, Christopher Columbus commanded his three ships, La Pinta, La Nina, and Santa Maria, discovering Cuba on the 27th of October, 1492. So he was in command of his three ships when he discovered Cuba, and he landed on the northeastern coast on the 28th of October, 1492. So he hung around offshore for a day, deciding whether he wanted to go in and check it out or not. So he waited a day, and then he went in. And then here we are today. Columbus then claimed the island for the new kingdom of Spain and named it Isla Juana after John, Prince of Asturias. Now today, the Cuban state asserts its adherence to socialist principles in organizing its largely state-controlled planned economy. So we went from Christopher Columbus to socialist-controlled state economy. Most of the means of production are owned and run by the government, so the communist government of Cuba control everything, including the economy. And most of the labor force is employed by the state. So everybody works for the government. And now this is interesting. Any company that hires a Cuban okay, must pay the Cuban government first, which then in turn pays the employee in Cuban pesos. So, Now, after economic reforms in January 2021, the minimum wage is about 2,100 Cuban pesos, or $17.50 US, and the median wage is about 4,000 Cuban pesos, which is about $33 a month. So Cubans make about $33 a month, which is paid to them by the communist government of Cuba, and that's how they roll down there. Cuba's natural resources include sugar, tobacco, fish, citrus fruits, coffee, beans, rice, potatoes, and livestock. Now the livestock, I believe, are also owned by the government. Cuba's most important mineral resource is nickel, with 21% of their exports, total exports in 2011, derived from nickel. And the output of Cuba's nickel mines that year was 71,000 tons, or close to 4% of the world population, the world production. With the entire island south of the Tropic of Cancer, the local climate is tropical, moderated by northeasterly trade winds that blow around year-round. Okay, the temperature is also shaped by the Caribbean current, which brings in warm water from the equator. Cuba has a subtropical rather than a tropical climate in general, with local variations. There is a drier season from November to April and a rainier season from May to October. The average temperature is 70 degrees in January and 81 degrees in July. So July is hot, and so is January, but it's nice weather. The official language of Cuba is Spanish, and the vast majority of Cubans speak Spanish. Spanish is spoken in Cuba is known as Cuban Spanish and is a form of Caribbean Spanish. Now, Haitian Creole is the second most spoken language in Cuba, and it is spoken by Haitian immigrants and their descendants. Now let's talk about Cuban food. Food, my favorite subject. Come on. Now, Cuban cuisine is a fusion of Spanish and Caribbean cuisine. So Spanish and Caribbean food ideas combined together. Cuban recipes share spices and techniques with Spanish cooking and with a Caribbean influence, okay, in spice and flavor. Unfortunately, food rationing has been the norm in Cuba for the last 40 plus years, and thus this restricts the common availability of these dishes. Most unfortunate, guys. And the traditional Cuban meal is not served in courses. All food items are served at the same time. So they don't have it in separate, soup, then this and this. And no. Cuban lunch is, boom, here it is. Everything. Cuban dinner, boom, here it is, all together. And the typical meal can consist of plantains, black beans, rice, ropa vieja, shredded beef, translated, Cuban bread, pork with onions, and tropical fruits. Now that sounds pretty good to me. Black beans and rice, referred to as moros y cristianos, or moros for short, okay? And plantains are basic staples of the Cuban diet. And many of the meat dishes are cooked slowly with light sauces, garlic, cumin, oregano, and bay leaves, which are the dominant spices. Well, that's enough about food. I'm getting hungry. Now let's talk about the U.S. Embassy in Communist Cuba, K-1 visas, etc. Come on, let's go. This is important stuff here. The good news is that the U.S. Embassy in Cuba is processing K-1 visas and spousal visas, but tourist visas, zero. So if you're a Cuban and you want to come to the U.S. on vacation, they're not processing those visas. But if you're in the middle of a K-1 visa package, you're good to go. The address to the U.S. Embassy right here is in Havana. That's the address. And if you need to call the U.S. Embassy in Cuba, this is the phone number right here. All right? Now, so immigrant visas, good news, the U.S. Embassy in Havana is currently offering full immigrant visa services, and this includes the processing of K-1 visas. Now, the U.S. Embassy in Georgetown, Guyana also is open as the designated processing post for immigrant visa services for Cuban applicants whose cases have already been scheduled there. So if the National Visa Center sent your visa package to Guyana in the embassy in Georgetown, don't worry, you can still continue processing your visa in Guyana. In fiscal year 2022, 363 K-1 visas were approved by the U.S. State Department for the good citizens living in the nation of Cuba. So if you live in Cuba and you're engaged to an American citizen, you'll get your visa, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. But just be patient during the process. Like I tell everybody in every video, this is not a fast, rapid process. You got to be patient. Patience, patience, patience. But soon you will be on an airplane with your K-1 visa, K-2 visa in your hand, flying to the United States of America, ready to start your life over. Maybe it's here in Florida, but wherever it is, Karina and I, we wish you the best of luck and much success when you get to America. And you're going to find things are a little different here in the USA. It's called freedom. Freedom of the internet, freedom of speech, freedom there's no food rationing, okay? And there's plenty for everybody. It just requires that you work hard, give it your best effort, and have a positive attitude. Thanks for watching.
I'll be back.